What's up, y'all? Welcome into another edition of DNVR Rams Live, presented by our friends at Branded Bills. At brandedbills.com, use that code BBDNVR for 15% off of your first order. Hope everybody has had a nice start to their week here. Obviously, about 40 hours or so removed from the catastrophe that was CSU's performance in the border war, fifth straight loss in Laramie. 28-0 was about as ugly as it gets. I'd say that's the worst CSU has looked in the border war since that 44-0 drumming back in 2010 under Steve Fairchild. It was hard to watch, and we'll spend a decent portion of today's show talking about what went wrong, takeaways, and all of that, but I just don't have 60 minutes of talking about that game in me. So we're also going to talk about the coaching carousel, how a wild cycle this winter potentially makes it potentially makes it more pressure on CSU to not only get this hire right, but to potentially do it a little quicker than you would maybe like to, just given how many jobs are going to be open in this cycle. We'll get into all kinds of stuff later on in the show. I'll give some thoughts on the hoops exhibition just based on the numbers. Obviously, it was covering the border war. We're going to do the Mountain West Power Ranking this week on Monday's show instead of Friday. CSU has a bye. Friday, we'll probably talk hoops, maybe get a unique interview on there. We're just going to get it out of the way. And I've got some rough news for Ram fans. It's far lower than I ever anticipated them. I actually have them in the bottom spot, so we'll get into all of that. Didn't anticipate anybody taking Nevada's spot this year. But, I mean, Nevada's at least competing. They're losing games, but they're at least competing. And what we saw from CSU on Saturday night was awful. Taylor says in the Toyota chat, can't believe I drove to Laramie for that. It's been a common sentiment over the last decade. I posted on Twitter, it was like my 13th consecutive border war or whatever it is, going back to 2013. I've been to every single one, Fort Collins and Laramie since then. And really, I'd say at least 3 out of the last 5 times, if not 4, have been sitting there by the third quarter thinking, man, what a waste of gas this was. And it's just a shame because it's my favorite rivalry. If you follow my content, you know how much I care about the border war. I'm really passionate about it. It was a perfect day, the best weather we've had for a border war in a while. It was a nice drive up, 287. As much as we talk about the dangers of 287, which are legitimate, especially in the winter, when it goes right, it's a drive I actually enjoy quite a bit. It's kind of pretty, at least on the Colorado side of things, and it's better than being on I-25 when you're on wall-to-wall traffic 7 days a week. All the credit to Wyoming. It was an awesome atmosphere. The fans showed up in masses. It was fun. You could feel the buzz leading up to kickoff. Their press box and stadium renovations look great. They did a really good job modernizing their facility. And they came out and they kicked CSU's ass in every phase of this game. It was over after the first quarter. Wyoming had twice as much time as possession as CSU did in the first half. I mean, the writing was on the wall very, very quickly in this game. And to me, I wrote this in my post-game column, but this feels like the perfect representation of what this football program has become in the post-Sonny Lubick world. Honestly, I wish I wouldn't have tweeted quite as much as I did Saturday night. Admittedly, it was an infuriating showing, especially as an alum in this game, one that means so much to me. It was tough to watch. And for the fans, that spent their hard-earned money on tickets. At least I get a credential comped, I mean, got to drive up there. But for the fans that spent their hard-earned money to support CSU and make the trek up there, I felt really bad for them. I'm tired of feeling like the game was a waste of time, like it was a poor use of everybody's weekend. I mean, I'm just tired of CSU looking soft in the border war. I'm tired of Wyoming seemingly caring so much more about the matchup than the Rams do. And I know they won in 2024, so it may be a little bit unfair of me to say CSU doesn't care about the game. I don't think that's the case. But I do think that the passion that Wyoming plays with has been very evident in the results over the last decade. They've won 8 of the last 10 against CSU. I mean, that's crazy. When I was a kid, you certainly respected Wyoming, but Sonny owned them for such a long stretch that it wasn't a matchup that you went into with the same type of fear. I guess like 03, that loss up in Laramie with a really good, CSU team that maybe underperformed a little bit was kind of the first time it felt like, oh man, this can be more of a back and forth affair for me. Granted, I'm only 30 years old, like don't come for me in the comments. But to see what it's become over the last 10 to 15 years is just insane. And I feel like a lot of the emotion that was felt both by the fan base and by myself on Saturday night, it's really less about this team specifically. And that's why I kind of wish I wouldn't have tweeted as much as I did, just because an interim coach, there's not a whole lot at stake for these guys moving forward. It's human nature to kind of look forward to the future. Realistically, a lot of these kids are not going to be back next year. And while it will hurt to lose some of them to the portal, there are some talented kids you'd love to build around, and hopefully they can hang on to some of them. The reality is a reset is needed. And I hope that whoever CSU brings in this next coaching hire is able to get the Rams to be up for this game in a way that we just have not seen consistently enough over the at least last decade, really more like last 15, 20 years. It's just been tough to watch. It feels like CSU lacks killer instinct, and it really becomes evident in these games where there's something at stake. CSU, or CU, Air Force, Wyoming, bowl games, those type of matchups. It just feels like the Rams get stuffed in a locker and very rarely punch back in any fashion. And to lose 28-0 to this Wyoming team is a pretty low moment for the program in the 21st century. I mean, it's not 2010 anymore. They have all the resources. They have the staff resources, nutritional resources, infrastructure, uniforms, whatever you want to point to. I mean, the amount of investment that CSU has committed to athletics over the last 15 years and the lack of progress that's come with it is just baffling. And I will say, maybe there is something to be said about, for those that argue so much that CSU does not do a good enough job recruiting locally. While I think that CSU's approach on paper makes sense in targeting Southern California, Texas, trying to land some of these higher rated recruits that in theory have, higher ceilings. Ceilings don't really matter a whole lot when you're consistently finding ways to lower your floor. And that's what CSU has seemingly done time and time again. And while I can talk about hypotheticals and everything coming together, when you're getting your butt kicked by Wyoming year after year, I mean, what does any of that matter? Maybe there is something to be said about playing for pride. I think if you're a devil's advocate here, you're going to point out that Wyoming, although they've had tremendous success against CSU in this matchup, their floor as a program and their ceiling as a program have been pretty evident. I'd say at least since Bowl came in, they're always going to be a team that's competitive. Last year, record aside, they even fought hard at the end, but they're always going to be a team that's going to be in it. They're going to be competitive. They'll be frisky. They'll punch up occasionally. They're certainly always going to be up for the border war. but they're not really able to compete with the Boise States, the San Diego States of the world. And obviously, if you're CSU, based on what you're investing, your aspirations are higher than all of that. And I believe that. But again, like we're looking so far ahead that we're not able to have a positive outcome in the matchup that's right in front of us. And that's Wyoming. And I'm tired of it. I'm tired of it. I also want to say that I made a post on the Wyoming fans storming the field against this CSU team, which is obviously struggling. I was wrong. Storm away. They kick CSU's butt. They deserve to be able to celebrate it. And this is not directed at anybody individually, because I had a couple people tweet it at me and I saw a bunch of other people just post something in a similar vein. But the last thing that I'm going to do when it comes to the CSU Wyoming dynamic is act pretentious, act holier than thou, or like we're too good for this matchup, which I think is easy to do in this instance. It's easy to go to the petty response of, oh, it's their Super Bowl, or, oh, this is the only game that they have going for them, and that's why they're always up for it. Well, frankly, I wish that CSU would play with the same passion that Wyoming does in this matchup. I wish the fans would bring the same level of intensity that the Wyoming fans do. And when I see comments like that, it kind of makes my blood boil, because that's the same snarky shit that CU does to us, and it drives all of us absolutely insane. I'm not going to be that guy. I'm not going to be that guy in this matchup when we can't even bother to show up for it. And that's the best we can do, is the snarky response like, oh, it's your Super Bowl. Well, if it is their Super Bowl, they're freaking dominating CSU in it. And I don't know. I just feel like it comes off as tone deaf and spoiled, frankly. And we deserve to take shit from them based on the performance that CSU has had in this matchup over the last decade. I'd love to see it change, but it's just become such a common issue with this team of not being able to show up in the games that matter. And I don't know, I don't know where you go from here. I don't know how you solve it. Maybe that's going to have to do with the culture, which is kind of a cliche and a meaningless term at this point, that gets built under the next coach. But man, this program has got to learn to show some fight against Wyoming, because I'm pretty tired of getting embarrassed by them. And frankly, if things don't change in a hurry, they're going to come into Fort Collins and kick CSU's ass again in September. So that's where I feel like we're at with it. I will get into some takeaways and stuff like that. Matt in the Toyota chat said, would having Jay Norvell as head coach led to a different result? Hard to say, but it could have been worse. I don't think it can get much worse than what we saw on Saturday night. I also don't think changing offensive play callers for a third time seemingly did much of anything from a strategic advantage standpoint. I understood the decision from Tyson's standpoint. The offense has been a mess all year long. This is a guy who he's worked with at Western Kentucky. The powers have kind of shifted to Summers guys. I mean, you even look at like Trent Matthews on the sideline Saturday night. He was signaling a lot of the calls. Like, a lot of Tyson's guys have been elevated since he has taken over. And that makes sense, on paper. But I just think you looked at the offense and it seemed like there was no cohesion whatsoever. They never got in any type of rhythm. Didn't seem like a guy who really had a great pulse on what needs to happen in terms of maximizing his players. I liked what they did for Javion Kennard, but really outside of him, didn't feel like they were scheming up a lot of really creative ways to, get these guys open. And I don't know. Like, I don't know at this point if it's even worth like beating a dead horse over. Its team is very clearly not good. They've underperformed in a way that has not been true probably since like 2007. That was the last time I felt like a team that really had some decent players on it, maybe not great depth, but had some talent, was just basically totally irrelevant, and the season was over like halfway through October. It's just crazy to think that we're back in this position again. It feels like deja vu. It feels like Groundhog Day. And now we're in a situation where we're running out the clock. There's still 4 games left. And how can anybody, if you're a CSU fan, like how can you be expected to be up for these games, to be stoked about them in any way? What's the matter? Well, we all know that the season is a lost cause. We all know that there's going to be massive change coming. I don't know. I think it's going to be a pretty tough scene at Canvas Stadium these next couple weeks. I'll say that. Let's take a quick break, real quick. Let's get into some of the takeaways, and we'll put the border war behind us, and then we'll look forward towards the future. Talk about the coaching carousel. Talk about how the craziness that's ensuing in college football right now with some of these big time jobs opening up. Penn State, Florida, LSU, Arkansas. I mean, we've never really seen anything like this all in the same winter. But that is going to have a ripple effect that impacts everything from the SEC down to the FCS ranks even. I mean, it's going to have major impacts, major shockwaves felt throughout all of college football. But let's take that quick break real quick, and then we'll get into all of it. Whether you need snapbacks, truckers, fitteds, beanies, or tees, Branded Bills has you covered with performance and style. If you're looking for gear to make your brand stand apart from the crowd, Branded Bills has you covered with the best custom headwear. Start your order, and their dedicated team will help you create the exact custom apparel you need. They've got a partnership with CSU as part of their on-campus collection. I got this camo version right here. Big fan of it. Got the black one and the gold one on set in the back. Big shout out to Branded Bills, co-founded by a CSU alum. Head to brandedbills.com. Use that code BBDNVR for 15% off your first order. Hey, Colorado, stop by your local Dick's Sporting Goods for the hottest apparel and footwear from top brands like Nike, Adidas Originals, Hoka, DNVR, and more. Plus, you can score the latest equipment for baseball, football, soccer, basketball, and golf. All your tailgating essentials. If you find a lower price, they'll match it with their best price guarantee. It's so crazy to me that we are now partners with Dick's Sporting Goods. Get your gear fast with free curbside pickup at your nearest store or easy shipping from Dicks.com, because every season starts at Dick's. Cool. Joey B in the Toyota chat says, Wyo's community as a whole, they embrace the border war, and that football team, Fort Collins, does not. You're not wrong. I mean, the support for the program has been there. You look at the attendance numbers, they've been record-setting over the last couple of years. I think there's been more of an embrace of football, at least on campus, in the last couple of years compared to when I was a student, 10 years ago now, which makes me feel old as hell. But yeah, I mean, Wyoming certainly brings far more commitment to the matchup. It means more to them. And I understand, like, there is some validity to, some of the trolling and stuff that CSU throws Wyoming's way when it comes to, there's not a whole lot else up to do up there. But I mean, like, I don't know, it comes off as sour grapes to me, especially when you're 2-8 against them over the last decade. So to me, it's just a situation where we kind of got to take our licks and roll with it. Andy says, I graduated in 2006 and was spoiled because we were on top of the world with Sonny. My friends and I have become apathetic or about the program since then, just sad all around. It's tough to blame you. I mean, at some point, it all feels inevitable. Like, no matter what you change, it's still just going to be the same old CSU. And it's hard to kind of argue against that at this point, because the results are really against our favor for those of us that try to look at things through an optimistic lens. I mean, they've committed to facilities. They've changed everything behind the scenes, from like nutritional and just like the little resources that you need to sustain success. They've committed all of these things that weren't there, 10, 15 years ago. They have the stadium. They've made good hires on paper, at least a couple of them. I don't think Adazio fits that bill, but Bobo, Norvell, on paper, those were really good hires. And yet here we are in the same emotional distress that we were in 2010, 2011, late in the Fairchild era, where everything felt hopeless. And I guess if you're looking for a silver lining, it's that things can change in a hurry. I mean, look how quickly Jim McElwain was able to rejuvenate support for the program, was able to drum up some excitement for CSU football. In theory, with everything that's in place right now, if you could make the right hire and get this thing going with the students on board, and again, like, you are having decent crowds and stuff, like this really is potentially a sleeping giant. But it just never seems to play out that way, and that's what makes this next hire so important. I don't want to get too far off track here. We'll get into some of that in the second half. Good question from Kevin here that we'll talk about in the second half. I do think that the success of a program like Texas A&M and potentially Colin Klein's profile being boosted could have an impact on CSU's coaching search, but I think there's a lot of factors in that. So we'll get into all that. Let's briefly go through the takeaways. If I had to rewatch this game, so let's talk about what went wrong for the Rams. Again, don't feel like a whole lot's going to change over the last month. I mean, it maybe you squeak out one more game. Feels like Air Force is probably your best chance at a victory, just given how poor their defense is. But I don't know. I don't think CSU is going to be able to stop any of these last four offenses either. But the slow start was the exact opposite of what this team needed. Tay Lanier pretty much said as much post game. Wyoming had twice as much time of possession as CSU in the first half. They had the ball for like 10 minutes in each quarter. And everything just kind of compounded from there when you're not able to sustain drives, when you're turning the football over and your defense is on the field for long stretches at a time. They're not going to look their best because they're going to start looking gassed, and that's exactly what happened. I do feel like the defense was able to recover to an extent in the second half. I also think that's kind of human nature with Wyoming letting their foot off the gas, and really when the Rams desperately needed to stop the most early in the third quarter, they weren't able to do it. So while the third down numbers and some stuff like that were better on the third and fourth quarter, kind of roll my eyes a little bit because, again, like you're up 28-0. The game was firmly out of reach. I don't think Wyoming had to sweat once after the first quarter with this game. I was just wrong about the receiving core, and I'll own that. This is the worst passing offense that CSU has had in a long time. I mean, even that 2022 team, which couldn't block to save their lives, was able to hit some deep shots with Clay Millen to Torrey Horton, and then you saw like guys like Justice Ross Simmons and Lewis Brown start to come along as well. I mean, this team, they struggle to get open. The few times that the receivers do get open, it seems like the quarterback misses them. There was a play on third and long where Jordan Ross is wide open in the middle of the field. I mean, there's not a defender within 15 yards of him. Brousseau just straight up missed him. And I get it. He kind of faced a lot of pressure these last couple of weeks. He was looking to scramble. That internal clock goes off in your head. I got to get out of here. I got to try and make something out of this. But man, like this passing offense is just hard to watch. They don't even look at the middle of the field at all. Like, when was last time CSU just ran something simple like a successful slant? I feel like every team I watch in every football game across the country does it 7-8 times a game. Has CSU had one all year? I mean, they have. I'm using hyperbole, but like we just don't do little simple things to get ourselves in rhythm and make it easier on ourselves. And that compounded with the turnovers. Brousseau 3 interceptions in this game. 2 of them I felt like were on him. One of them maybe on the receiver. The third one, it was like fourth down too. So, he's just trying to make a play at that point. They go deep towards the end zone. I think it was for Keenan Higgins. Never even tried to make a play on the football. That was one of the things that drew a pretty spicy tweet from me. But I mean, if you watched Finley, James Finley, the wide receiver coach on the sideline, rip into him after the game, and I don't think he played again after that, you probably could say that the staff probably felt similar. Like it just was not a good enough effort, especially at that stage of the game. You need somebody to step up and make a play to spark any type of confidence whatsoever. And it just felt like after the first quarter, this team knew that they were going to get their ass kicked, and they played like it. I want to be fair to Jackson because this isn't all on him. I tried to make it very clear before the quarterback change happened that this wasn't going to be some magic switch that was able to erase all of the issues that CSU has had offensively. He's a really good dude. He's been a good teammate. He's perfectly suited to be a backup quarterback, but he's just not a starting quarterback at the FBS level. He doesn't have the arm strength. He can move around. He can elude pressure a little bit, but he moves like he's in sand at times. Like it's it's not a sustainable way to be competitive in the long term. Again, there's only so much you can do this season, and it sounds like he's going to be the starter moving forward. I asked Summers, what he felt like attributed to the offensive issues, and basically said, you've seen this offense all year. It's not good. I asked him what he saw from Curry, and he said, he earned that opportunity to play a little bit based on how he handled things against San Diego State. Also immediately added that Brousseau will remain the starting quarterback, and maybe that's a nod of respect to how Jackson has handled things during a really tough time for the program, and that's fair. And I don't know how you can buy into this offense for 4 more games of this. Like, while I have argued all season that Darius Curry is probably not ready, and throwing him into the fire could be more detrimental for his development than it's worth, at this point, I don't think the offense can get much worse. If nothing else, he can use his legs and create some plays for you that way. Seemed like the ball came out of his arm with a little bit more zip. From what I've seen in practice, accuracy can be a little bit erratic at times, but I mean, hey, that's the case right now with the game manager, and now you're turning the ball over on top of that. Like, the whole appeal of playing a quarterback like Jackson Brousseau is that he can keep you on schedule, and he did that well against UTSA, and he did that at times against Fresno State as well, but it has not been consistent enough, and there's a lot of factors that go into that. I don't feel like the play calling's been great. I don't feel like the offensive line has been awesome this year. The receivers have been a letdown. It's been a lot of things compounding, and he is far from the only issue right now. But when you watch that, it's just hard to feel like you have a chance to win. And these last couple of weeks have just been really disheartening. God. Only averaged 3.5 yards per carry in this one. Talked a lot about how you were going to have to run the ball with any type of consistency. Also needed to stop the run the other way. 3.5 yards per carry versus 6 for Wyoming. They were weirdly okay on first down, but awful on second and third down. And I feel like Wyoming was the opposite. CSU had some first down success, would stuff a run, and then on 2nd and 10 would give up a gain of 18. Some of those third downs in the first half were especially frustrating and especially backbreaking. You just couldn't get off the field on those first couple of scoring drives. I think in those first 2 scoring drives alone, there were 4 instances of Wyoming converting on like 3rd and 5+, or they converted on a 4th down as well. That's just not a way that you're going to be able to win very consistently. We talked a lot about having to limit explosives. Wyoming had twice as many big plays as the Rams did, and that's classified as rushes of 10 or more yards or passes of 15+ yards. CSU had 6, Wyoming at 11. CSU only recorded 1 first down throwing the ball this entire game. Aaron, I saw in the Toyota chat, commented on how Jackson has handled things better than Braden. I think optically, the way he's been able to handle the chaos, and obviously the fact that he's still on the team, that's probably true. And maybe there's something to that. Maybe that enough is justification in him, riding it out these last couple of games and starting. But again, this offense is just, it's bad. It's boring. It's a tough product to sell at this point. And at least Curry gives you the illusion of hope and allows you to start, playing he gets that experience this year card, and we'll see what happens in the future. I do think that regardless of if Curry gets to start some games at the end of this season or not, even if he were to and absolutely lit it up, like let's say Tyson Summers went back on what he said Saturday night, Curry was able to start these last 4 games and lit the world on fire. Even if that were to be the case, they still need to emphasize bringing in a veteran quarterback through the transfer portal and prioritize adding a veteran to compete in a way that they just haven't these last couple of years, really since Jay Norvell came over. Like, you came over with a starter in place in Clay Millen, and then you let him, do his thing for a year and a half. Then you go to Braden. And then once Braden took the gig, it never really was a competition again. And while I think that Darius is a very intriguing athlete, and I think he could have a bright future, like none of my comments about him not being ready to start are because I think he doesn't have any potential or anything like that. I just think it's hard as a young quarterback to see the field. And I think that if you get thrown into a bad situation where you don't have a lot of talent around you, you don't seemingly have play callers that are putting you in a position to succeed, that can be, more detrimental to your growth than anything. The other argument, the other end of the argument is obviously that the only way you can gain experience is by being out on the field. That's all true. But you have to bring somebody to come in and compete this winter, because based on, what we've seen from Jackson, and obviously Braden's going to be gone, like it's very clearly going to be a different starter next year. Maybe it's Darius, maybe it's someone else, but either way, you've got to bring somebody in to compete. I'll get into what Tyson said here in just a second. I'll give some final thoughts on the border war. Then we will turn our attention ahead to the future. We'll talk about the coaching carousel. I'll give some thoughts based on the takeaways. Oh my God, based on the exhibitions, my takeaways from Creighton. Very clearly tired after the last couple of days. But let me take a quick break real quick, and we'll keep it rolling here. All right, college football is back. There's no better option to get cheap tickets than with our friends at Game Time. I bet there's going to be crazy deals on Game Time these next couple of weeks with the amount of people trying to get rid of their tickets. It's going to be tough to give them away, I think. But even so, tailgating is always an elite way to spend your time. It's good to be back on campus. It's good to be around friends and alum and family and all that. As down as the tone of this pod has been, we are all college football fans, obviously, and it's a great way to spend Saturday. The Game Time app gives the advantage back to the fans. It's a hack for unlocking amazing tickets and experiences in just a few taps. The Game Time guarantee means you can trust you'll get 100% authentic tickets. Plus, I love that the price you see is the price you pay. You don't get hit with all these last-minute fees. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use that code DNVR for $20 off your first purchase. Terms to apply. Again, create an account, redeem that code DNVR for $20 off. Tap, ticket, go. Download the Game Time app today. Finally, trucks have always been a part of Toyota's DNA for generation. Toyota has built durable legends destined for greatness and perfect for Colorado. Whether you're conquering off-road trails, whether you're hauling the weight of the world, there's a Toyota truck that's just right for you. Check out the Tacoma. Check out the Land Cruiser. Toyota has 17 models with available all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive. That's what makes them perfect for Colorado. They've got more low and zero-emission vehicles combined than any other automaker, plus 16 hybrid vehicles to choose from. Toyota is a proud partner of CSU Athletics and the official vehicle of DNVR. Toyota, let's go places. Joey says, after this season, over under on how many kids leave the program. He has that line set at 27.5. I mean, it's tough to say at this point because you never know who might get hired. Maybe it's somebody who's really exciting, who all these players are going to want to play for. But I mean, it's going to be 20 plus. I feel pretty confident in saying that, and probably potentially even like 30 plus, depending on what type of coach they bring in. There's going to be drastic change for the program, and there's going to be some losses that are going to be tough to stomach. But the reality is this program desperately needs a reset. This just can't continue. You can't go 2-8 against Wyoming in a decade. You can't go over a decade without beating CU, beating Air Force twice in that time. Like, it's just not good enough based on what CSU is investing, and it's why Jay Norvell is no longer the coach, and it's why this season unfortunately has gotten away from us. But we'll see what happens moving forward. I'm not going to play any videos from Tyson Summers' podcast or post-game presser, because if you're listening later on the podcast, the audio is going to be brutal to listen to. The post-game presser was in some weird room above Wyoming's like track facility or something. I don't know. There was some crazy fan going in the background. It's humming the whole time. It's super annoying to listen to. And honestly, while I don't really fault Tyson, I don't think anything that was said was very interesting or confidence inspiring. If we're being real, there wasn't a ton of accountability. He was honest, maybe even to a fault. Like, basically said, what do you want us to do? Our coach just got fired on Sunday. This offense has sucked all year. Wish we were more competitive. Understand why the fans are frustrated, but it is what it is type deal. We're going to keep trying to make it better, and all of that's fair, and a lot of it is valid. But when you are the spokesman for a football program, it is a little bit on you to be a politician. That's why I always felt like Joe Parker was so uninspiring. Some of what he said was valid, but you can't say that wet blanket shit when you are the face of the program. Like, I get it. There's not a whole lot they can do with the team at this point, and I think that's probably fair. The players you have are the players that you have. I just also don't think that he said a whole lot that would get me very jazzed as a fan to line up and spend my Saturday at Canvas Stadium. I think that's all valid and fair. Again, there's only so much he can do, but it just was not. It was not super exciting. I think if you're a CSU fan to hear some of those comments, even if they are fair. We're in a run out the clock scenario, guys. Just being real. We'll still preview the games. We'll talk about it. We're obviously going to focus a lot more on basketball over these next couple of months. Excited for that. Hopeful that this team is able to make some noise and give us something to be proud of again. But it's all about the future at this point. And it's just a shame that this team underperformed as much as it has. Like, I think it's fair to say that we probably all overestimated what this group's ceiling was, but at the very worst, this should have been a 6-6 team with the schedule that they have, and that's a big factor in all of this. They didn't play very many good teams this season, and even so, they're getting boat raced week after week. It just feels so much like 2007 again, and then you saw that team in 2008 with a lot of same pieces bounce back and win a bowl game and be actually pretty competitive defensively. They weren't great. Maybe that'll be the case next year, but obviously with so much roster turnover in the modern era, it's kind of hard to compare, eras. The last thing that I will say, just kind of on the border war here, and this was a great post from Izzy Matthews, but it is important to remember that these kids are all 18 to 22 years old. It's fair to be pissed off or angry. It's fair to be critical. It's fair to want to burn it down, but all of these kids would most certainly prefer to not be on a terrible team. Don't cross the line. Don't be tagging them and stuff like that. A bunch of them have most certainly unfollowed me over the last couple weeks, and I get that. I wouldn't want to see people tweeting crap about me either. But I mean, it obviously comes with the territory. This team just has not been good enough, not even close. And this was just another chapter in what has been a sad, sad story in 2025. And frankly, I can't wait to turn the page ahead to 2026 because it's going to be a long month on the CSU football side of things. Thank God basketball is here. All right, let's see if we can bring the vibes up. Let's see if we can get the energy up over the second half of the show. Let's see if we can bring it back. Our guy Trayton, who's a big DNVR supporter, says, I know I'm in enemy territory, but what did you think of UW's unis on Saturday? He loved them. I thought that the helmets were cool. The jerseys were fine. Didn't love the pants. The pants have the weird speckle thing going on the back. I saw one Wyoming fan jokingly tweet that he didn't love the Cole ass. I would feel similar, I would say. But the helmets are cool. Don't love wearing them in a border war. I will say I feel like in these type of matchups, you should go traditional, but I'm an old man when it comes to that kind of stuff. So, hey, get off my lawn. That's where I'm at with the YO uniforms. But, yeah. All right, if you missed it, LSU opened. Programs are cool with just spending $150 million to get rid of a coach, and it's not actually going to be that much because all those buyout clauses have stipulations about the coaches needing to seek employment, like all these guys, James Franklin, Brian Kelly. As much as I love to meme him, he's still probably a top 15 coach in college football. It's just crazy, the gigs that have opened up before we've even gotten to November. And it's interesting to see how really patience has just completely gone out the window at this point. I do think that the implementation of a 12-team college football playoff has changed everything when it comes to this kind of stuff, because now every team is sitting there and thinking, well, if we can just spark together a couple of things, if a couple things go our way, go 10-2, maybe win the league, something like that, we're going to have a pretty good chance to go to the playoff. And that's what results in teams like Arkansas and some of these Virginia Tech, really going all in a way that they maybe didn't in the past, would have been a little bit more patient with coaches, giving them an opportunity. It's just not the case anymore. Patience does not exist. Penn State, LSU, Florida, Arkansas, UCLA, Oklahoma State, Virginia Tech all open. Stanford's open. We knew that coming into the year technically, but Oregon State is open. There are a lot of intriguing jobs on the market, a lot of jobs that are objectively higher on the pecking order in the world of college football than CSU. I think you could make an argument that in the playoff era, you probably have an easier path forward to the CFP at a place like CSU or Oregon State than you do, say, Arkansas or Oklahoma State, just given the depth of those leagues, the talent that you are going to have to be able to be better than. It's just tougher sledding in those leagues. It's also true that there's so much money being thrown around in those conferences that even if objectively it's probably not a great job, you kind of have to roll the dice on it anyways. And worst case, you end up with a big paycheck to go away at the end. And I get coaches that view it that way as well. I do think it'll be interesting, though, to see potentially how high profile of coaching candidates schools like UCLA, Oregon State, CSU are able to attract. You know that the Penn States of the world, the Floridas and LSU, that's always going to be a great gig. And I'm sure they're going to command interest of really high profile coaches. Maybe Lane Kiffin leaves Ole Miss for one of those jobs. Feels like now is as hot as his stock has ever been. And you could maybe make an argument that they've kind of reached the ceiling of what Ole Miss is going to be able to accomplish in that league. He's a great coach. They've got great funding, but like at the end of the day, you're still not LSU. You're not Bama. You're not one of those schools. Maybe he decides to go up. All I know is that the impact of all of this is going to be it's going to be felt across the sport. There's going to be so many stats impacted by this because, if Ole Miss gets their coach poached, then they're poaching somebody else's coach, and whoever's coach they take in that school is going to now need a coach. Like it's going to be chaos, and we're only going to see more coaches get fired between now and December. And because of that, I do think it maybe incentivizes CSU to try and get a deal done sooner than later. That may not be possible. You do have to run an exhaustive search. You can't rush the process. You do have to be very thorough in all this because, as I've said multiple times now, this is the most important hire, at least in Sonny Lubick, but given what's at stake, probably in the history of the program. Sonny, in hindsight, it was the biggest hire. We know that definitively, but I don't know if it felt like that in the moment when he was announced. Right now, if you don't get this hire right, you're going to be screwed. You basically already missed the boat. You're on a life raft right now trying to catch up with it, hoping that the tides and the winds are just favorable enough for you to be able to reach the island in the end. But if they mess this up, I just don't know where you go from here because you have already played all your cards at this point. You built the stadium. You spent a bunch of money hoping that an investment in athletics will pay off in the long run. I don't know if it will if you can't get this hire right. Like we're just running out of time with the gap between the haves and the have-nots just becoming wider and wider. And with the Big Ten and the SEC doing everything in their power to gain more and more control of the sport and to separate themselves from everybody else, it's never been more important to be competitive, to be relevant nationally, to be the type of program that was envisioned when you built Kansas Stadium, when you put all this money into athletics in the first place. My initial gut was that we won't see a hire announced anytime soon, and that's still probably somewhat true. I mean, it's not even to Halloween yet. Like, I don't anticipate it being this week or something like that. How funny would it be if it actually was? But I do think that because all of these jobs are already open, all these high-profile jobs, and we know there's going to be an insane ripple effect, the longer you wait, the more gigs are going to open up. Potentially the less access to quality coaches you're going to have. There's just going to be less guys on the table for you. And you also run the risk of being leveraged. You don't want to get strung along by somebody who thinks, one of these other gigs is going to open up or thinks that they're going to land the school that loses their coach when, Florida poaches Ole Miss or something like that. Like there's going to be so many different moves from agents and everybody else. Like it's going to turn into straight chaos these next couple of months. And I just want to remind everyone to kind of take all of the information that comes out with a grain of salt, because a lot of it is going to be agenda driven. This guy trying to get his client, talked about in the conversation, stuff like that, or also people just straight up making things up, which is going to happen a lot in all of this as well. I'm trying to find, I had a screenshot here from Sean Keeler's piece that came out over the weekend, which I thought was interesting, kind of segueing into all of this. Everything that I had always heard behind the scenes was that Sonny Lubick really did not want his son, Matt, to ever be the head coach at CSU, knowing that it would put him in a position where you're all but guaranteed to not live up to expectations. Like, it's just such a standard, such a high, unrealistic mark that we're all going to have if he gets the gig. But based on his interview with Sean Keeler and not wanting to name candidates that could potentially hurt Matt's chances of landing the job, I mean, if Sonny embraces it, if Sonny signs off on it, I'd certainly be intrigued by the possibility of Matt Lubick taking over the program, only because I think he's one of 3 or 4 names that would get the big time donors, the richest, most important people, as far as CSU's football's, supporter group goes. That's how you're going to get them to open up their checkbooks, is by going with somebody like him. I think Colin Klein would be in there as well. Tony Alford, maybe. Just, somebody that is able to really give this program a big influx of cash and financial support, which is obviously always a big selling point in the modern era, outside of prioritizing somebody who has a proven track record as a head coach, or potentially the ability to bring a quarterback / a large portion of his roster over. And I saw somebody in the Toyota chat throughout North Texas, potentially bringing the QB with him. Like, outside of going that route, I think you probably have to go with who is going to generate the most excitement, who is going to get people to buy in, to buy season tickets, to donate to NIL, all of that, because that's how you build a roster these days. And somebody like Matt Lubick, who has no head coaching experience to this point, and that would admittedly make me a little bit nervous, but that he's going to drum up local support. That he's probably going to be able to put together a pretty good staff based on his connections. He's worked at a lot of big time programs, and obviously just growing up in the game. I would be intrigued by that possibility. I'd be very interested to see if he would still call plays in that scenario. He's the co-OC at Kansas right now, or maybe, he's highly involved, but he hands the play calling over to somebody else. Sonny always had 2 different play callers on both sides of the ball, and that's something that I always appreciated. But I did find that interesting. I guess I could just read the quote instead of paraphrasing here. But this was what he said to Sean Keeler of the Denver Post. You don't want to hear that from me. Whatever I say is the opposite of what will happen. They did ask me one time, and I think it helped. I tried to give my honest opinion. I just want the best thing for the school. I don't know why they wouldn't ask me. Well, there is one reason, and that would be Matt, obviously. If they ask me who should be the next head coach, they know what I would say. That would hurt Matt, probably. It's better that I stay out of it. I felt like that was a really interesting quote. Maybe I'm interpreting it wrong, but it does feel like he's saying, like, I don't want to say somebody else should be the head coach, because that's going to hurt Matt's chances, and obviously that would hurt him. Just interesting. Very, very interesting. And as Dylan says, is Matt being considered for any other job? He's like 15, has never been a head coach. If his name wasn't John Smith, he wouldn't be considered. I think that's a little harsh. He has play calling experience, which Alford doesn't, like significant play calling experience at multiple big time institutions, and people still throw Alford's name out every single time and then pound the table for him. I also think you need to factor in the fact that he's a cancer survivor. He had leukemia, so probably wasn't actively pushing for a head coaching gig very frequently over the last decade. I mean, he's certainly interviewed for CSU before, but I think that would be an oversimplification of the facts, if I'm being honest with you. And obviously the biggest selling point of him would be he certainly wouldn't be leveraging CSU, as Joey says in the Toyota chat. Assume that he'd be loyal if he were to have success. I've argued that you can't really factor that in too much because that's how you can potentially hire a quote unquote safe choice, but not an actual quality choice. If you hire a guy that's good enough to get poached away, that means you're having success and that means you did a good thing. You don't want to be a stepping stone year after year. You don't want it to be a revolving door scenario. But the reality is only one coach ever has been hired away from CSU. Everybody else has been fired. Like that is the cold hard truth. And I feel like whenever the CSU football head coaching position opens again, everybody's always like, we don't want to be a stepping stone. We don't want to be a stepping stone. And you don't want to be late 90s, early 2000s Wyoming. But at this point, I just want to see the team win. That's where I'm at right now. And yeah, Dylan says, well, I don't think Alfred should be considered either. I get you. I'm just pointing out that it's not as simple as, well, he's never been a head coach. I think he's been very respected in college football circles. He's been an OC at Oregon, at Nebraska, at Kansas, a lot of big time programs. I thought what he did last year at Nevada with Brendan Lewis was highly impressive. The guy knows ball. That's all I'm saying. I can vouch for him in that sense. I think you probably could have interest from higher profile candidates, but I mean, somebody like Colin Klein, what he's doing at A&M is very impressive. I think he's very intriguing, but he's got far less experience than somebody like Lubick does, and that's fair to point out as well. I don't know who the perfect choice is. You know, I don't envy these administrators. I'm glad I'm not an athletic director. It's a really tough spot. Again, with the pressure and what's at stake here and how they can't afford it, they're going to have to be very sure in their process. And it doesn't really matter what, dorks like me say on their podcasts, as long as they're sure and how they're evaluating things and trust the process. But man, it's a tough one because you prioritize somebody that has the head coaching experience like Vigen or Polasek at a smaller level, but you maybe question if it's going to translate. I would say that the track record of guys like Entz, although a small sample size at Fresno State, Eck at New Mexico, make you feel better about going with a guy like that. Also, if you go with somebody like Polasek, no buyout, coming over from North Dakota State is really intriguing. Tim Skipper, I'd throw into the equation. I love how as soon as they lose a game, now it's Skip's face on the graphics. It's all Jerry Neuheisel and everything's going great, but the minute they lose a game, they're putting a sad Skipper on the graphics of that Indiana game. Thought that was kind of lame from some of these college football media accounts. Not shocking either. I would say based on the very obvious candidates that would be in play, and who knows who they're actually going to go with. Nobody in the world saw Jay Norvell coming. Nobody saw Adazio coming. Maybe Bobo, just because he was kind of a popular head coaching candidate at the time based on what he had done at Georgia. Based on like the guys with CSU ties, I think Lubick would make a lot of sense. Based on just local ties, I think Klein would make a lot of sense. Maybe it's recency bias, but I'm really coming around on the idea of Polasek, especially after the way that they throttled South Dakota State just based on how CSU is never up for their rivalry games. Maybe getting a guy like him in here could bring the right type of attitude and turn the tide in those types of games. He also has a ton of Colorado ties recruiting, which I think is a strong selling point, as is for Colin Klein and would be the case with Skipper and Lubick as well. I really like Jason Eck. His buyout is high. It's over $4 million, and that might be a little bit steep to poach a coach from the Mountain West at this point, but he has got an energy that is infectious. He has that team playing with the swagger and confidence that's been missing from CSU for a long time. I'm pretty high on Eck. He might be my favorite candidate realistically. Like, obviously, I'm really high on Clint Kubiak. I don't think he wants the gig. I think he's pretty close to landing an NFL job. I would be very much on board with Colin Klein. But as far as proven head coaches go, I would say that Eck, Polasek, and Vigen are kind of my top three right now. And I would think that all three of those guys could potentially be in play for CSU. Before we get out of here, let's do our Mountain West power ranking real quick, and I'll give a couple thoughts on the Hoops exhibition. We're going to fly through this because there's just not a ton of change. And honestly, I think you guys have a pretty good idea of where the league is at right now. But I will say putting CSU at 12 hurt my heart. I think you have to, though. They have more talent than teams that are ahead of them on this list. They're ahead of some of these teams on the standings. But if we're going on the eye test, if we are going on the direction that the team is trending, I think it's tough to say that anybody in the league feels worse than CSU right now. There were no expectations for Nevada. They were supposed to suck, and they do. For this Rams team to be as bad as they are, I got to put them at 12. I've got Nevada at 11. Never expected them to be higher than 12 this year, but here we are. San Jose State 10. Nevada and San Jose State both go up a spot because CSU falls to the bottom. Air Force 9, Wyoming 8. I know that Air Force technically beat Wyoming head-to-head a couple weeks ago, but I do think that Wyoming's a better team. They kind of choked that game away. Utah State 7, they're not trending in the right direction right now. Fresno 6 could maybe put them even lower based on their showing in Albuquerque. Super stoked for New Mexico. Love to see them play as well as they did against Utah State and Bronco Mendenhall. Lobo fans have been through it these last couple of years. Hawaii at 4. UNLV at 3, San Diego State 2. San Diego State might be the most complete team in the league. Finally, Boise State at 1. That's where we're at with the Mountain West Power Ranking right now. I was unfortunately not able to watch the exhibition. I think you had to pay like $8 to watch it live. I had the live stats up the whole time while I was in Laramie, especially when the game got pretty ugly there late in the first quarter, second quarter. I found myself looking at the stats more than I probably should have been. But CSU falls 76-64 to Creighton. The exhibition out in Omaha had an early lead. Seemed like it was pretty competitive throughout. Our guy Steve Ivy, aka Swole Cracker, I know he had a live stream breaking it down. Had Ali on his show this morning as well. Go check that out. Much love to our guy Swole. Does a great job covering the hoop side of things. And my show is definitely going to lean much more into hoops here in the coming weeks because there's only so much we can do when it comes to this football program. But I would say giving up 76 on the road to a top 25 team, given how many new pieces you have in place, given the fact that you lost your best defender in Neat Clifford, was pretty encouraging, all things considered. I mean, if CSU shoots the 3 ball any better than they did in this game, you would be right there with a chance to beat Creighton again. If CSU won this exhibition, Creighton would have never scheduled us again in anything. But the Rams went 5 of 27 from 3. You know, that was a big factor in losing by 12. On the other hand, Creighton went 10 of 27, so literally hit twice as many threes as CSU did. I'm not panicked over that. I know that the Rams have some pretty streaky guys. Rex Steiner would be in that conversation, 1 of 9 from 3. Maybe jacked up a few too many in this game. Pasquarelli, 1 of 6. He's a guy who I think is going to shoot the ball at a much higher clip than that most nights. Jorgensen going 3 of 4 from deep was encouraging. 12 points from him. It's going to be interesting to see what type of leap he is able to make this year. This roster is going to be really interesting because they're not anywhere near a solidified rotation. And I think it's going to take probably a couple of weeks into the season, really to shake that out. I mean, they've got competition 1 through 5. I mean, I would say Bemba is about the only person, assuming that he's healthy, I would guarantee is going to be in the starting lineup. And kind of a vintage Bemba performance. Again, I didn't get a chance to watch it, but 6 points, 5 personal fouls in 12 minutes. That's not super ideal. But I like this group, and I think they're going to be far better than anticipated. I understand why people are a little low on them just based on the amount of turnover from this past season. Obviously, Nico going to Minnesota as well. But Ali's a great coach. He's going to put these kids in a position to succeed. I'm hearing really good things about a couple of these transfers kind of finding their flow within CSU's offense, which admittedly takes some time. I'm hearing really encouraging things about Kerry Booth. I know Steve's talked about that some as well, but I kind of told people to temper expectations when he signed because while his athletic ceiling is through the roof, maybe the highest athletic ceiling of anybody CSU's had since I've covered the team over the last decade. And I mean, Neek was a freak, and so was Roddy, so that's saying something. He was just really raw and had very little experience, but it sounds like he's really worked his ass off and is starting to really figure things out. 9 points, 9 boards from him. I mean, if he pops this year, that greatly elevates this team's ceiling. I'm excited about this group, and I think they're going to be solid. I love that they only turn the ball over 5 times. Again, a lot like what I said with only giving up 76 points. To only turn the ball over 5 times with this many new pieces was intriguing. I think 10 second chance point is encouraging. 23 bench points, that's encouraging. They got out and ran on them a little bit. 28 fast break points. There's a lot to like about the numbers. 13 assists on 24 made field goals. I mean, numbers wise, this feels pretty similar to a Nico Medved era box score, and I just think people are sleeping on this team. I think they're sleeping on the potential of what CSU can be in a Mountain West that, outside of San Diego State, who's a clear cut above everybody else, feels fairly wide open at this point. It's going to be a fun hoop season in the league. It's going to be a little bit bittersweet. I love Mountain West basketball so much. I'm going to miss, the tournament and stuff like that. The Pac-12 is going to be a great hoops league too. Don't get me wrong. If you missed it, going to be a 16-game round robin schedule in that first year of the league, which means we're going to get to see Gonzaga at Moby, which is super cool. But this team is probably going to take a little bit of time to figure it out. But once they do, I think a lot like last year, they're going to have a pretty good chance to be a top 3rd team in the league. And by February, March, they're going to be right there in the mix and should be a really exciting, Mountain West tournament, especially now that you had GCU. I mean, it's a great hoops league that only got better with the addition of Grand Canyon this year. So I'm really looking forward to all that. It's going to get a little bit chaotic, given that I'm doing the Avs coverage as well. Doesn't look like there's a ton of overlap in the non-conference slate, which is exciting. Hopefully that proves to be the case in the conference schedule as well. That's all I've got for you guys today. Shout out to everybody in the Toyota chat rocking with us, even after just a brutal weekend. Much love to our guy Kevin showing some love for the show in the chat. The last thing I'm going to say, and I'm not going to make this a whole soap opera, I'm going to still try to engage online as much as I can. This is a weird one to talk about without coming off as either a crybaby or a tool, but my social media profile, my following has gotten just large enough that it's not really that fun anymore to post, because everything that I draw escapes the containment of our little community and just draws a ton of trolls and masses. And that's what comes with, having a larger platform and growth within the industry, which is exciting. And I'm very thankful to so many people like you, but it's become kind of a tough balance for me, because one thing that I have always prioritized is being accessible and engaging and willing to go back and forth with you guys, because there's so many people in the media who act like they're too good to do it. And that's always really, really rubbed me the wrong way. And that's the last thing that I want to do. But again, because I now have a larger profile and these posts and my shows are reaching more and more people, it's also just, it's drawing a lot of really nasty stuff on there. People just coming at me and in a hard way. And this isn't a woe is me type scenario. I'm so blessed to be able to do this. I'm so blessed to have so many incredible people in my corner that support the content, that tune in. But I've gotten some really nasty stuff in the last couple of weeks. And I just it's like, what do you do? If I respond, it makes me look bad. You try to ignore it. But I mean, granted, you should know, there was some account Weedtron something like that tweeted at me 4 times the other night, making fun of my double chin after my instant reaction video. And there's probably, I probably could lose a couple pounds if we're being real. So there's probably some truth to the fact that he hit on something that hit me where it hurts, but also it's just man, I shouldn't have to deal with this. And maybe it's just to a point where it's I'm just going to post and get out. I'm not going to go back and forth as much, because I'm tired of dealing with nameless, faceless assholes who are just spewing the nastiest shit my way. It gets really tiring, and it makes me understand why some of the bigger people in media, why they don't engage at all, why they just post and get out. I want to be able to go back and forth. I'm always going to try and have thicker skin than that. But the only reason I'm even saying this is if it feels like I'm a little bit less responsive these next couple of weeks compared to where I've been, I'm just worn down. And some of the stuff that got sent my way, it hit hard Saturday night. I am human. I can do my best to be oh, it's just some nameless, faceless account. What they're saying doesn't matter, but I'm human and I have emotions and feelings and everything else. And while I do my best to be accessible and a man of the people, there's only so much that you can take. And when I find myself sitting there thinking about it for hours on end. It's just like not a healthy balance. So that's where I'm at. Hopefully that didn't come off too much as me being a crybaby or whining or anything like that. It gets tiring. Oh yeah. Speak of the devil, one of our favorite trolls, Cam Duncan, in the mix. But shout out to all you guys in Ram Nation. Thank you so much for being able to tune in and support everything we do. I would not be here without incredible people like you. Thank you for listening to the DNVR Rams podcast presented by Branded Bills. Head to brandedbills.com. Use that code BBDNVR for 15% off your order. Much love, y'all. We are always proud to be, even after a brutal weekend. Peace.
We all silly like the mayor.